live any second now. So we are live. Massive thanks to the Facebook audience. Massive thanks to Mark Zuckerberg, whether you're listening live at a later time. Look, I'd love if he was listening. It would be interesting. I wonder how many of these Facebook lives he tunes into. I'm sure the first ever Facebook live he would have tuned in, and maybe he did the first ever Facebook live. So, Will, massive thanks for joining us this afternoon. So technology changing things all the time. You know, Zoom is becoming. I was on a Zoom call last night. It was interesting. Someone was describing Zoom almost like the old property forums, and it's almost replacing them. And I can understand in that way. It's a good perspective. So for those listeners who don't know, Will is from a co-working space, which is, have I got it right? Co-space?
Yes, yeah.
Or co-space? Which do you prefer to say, Will?
Yeah, I just term it as co-space, but the actual search kind of hyphen is co-space, and the website co-space.
So look, co-working is what most people are talking about right now as one of the growth trends going forward. For the listeners out there, and I have to admit, I didn't know this. Ranjan Bhattacharya informed me because he's actually been to see the site, so possibly that's why he knew. One of your sites is in Reading, really good location, Crossrail impact, and it's in a retail center. So do you want to describe that, Will, for the listeners? Will's my panel on Monday. So look, it's just a short interview, possibly 15 minutes, maybe a little bit more, bit less. Feel free to add questions as well if you're listening live or at a later time.
Cool. Yeah, so CoSpace, CoSpace is a flexible workspace operator primarily focused on creating flexible space that is design-led outside of London in regional towns and cities throughout the UK. We look to pick up on sites that are what we term as kind of failing retail. So I think you know the retail high street is changing a lot, and what we're trying to do is bring a form of flexible workspace in the form of office space to former retail units. There's no surprise that if you walk down the high street, 1 out of 3 units is typically vacant and sometimes a bit less, but there's a lot of space, and we're trying to repurpose that. So the Reading site is repurposing part of a mall retail. It's in Broad Street Mall, which is the kind of there's two malls in Reading. There's the Broad Street Mall, which is the original one, and then there's the Oracle, which was built after. And Broad Street Mall is now being regenerated by a prop company to have your more millennial focused shops and these kind of things, and we're part of that regeneration.
So look, Will, this is not the first time you've done a retail space, I believe, as well. So that's the key thing to know.
Yeah. So our model is to go after. There's probably 25% that are actual former office space, but the rest is looking at retail space. The Lincoln site was formed up of that. The test site that we launched. We've got a few other sites that we're looking at. So the site in Stevenage, a few sites in other places that we've agreed heads of terms on and are going to be promoting in the coming months that are primarily retail. And we try and aim for that city centre, town centre, and not the outer borough business parks.
Oh, that's interesting. So when you say not the outer borough business parks or outer borough?
The outer borough business parks and the outer boroughs. We try and stay fairly central. The only place we'd look at external boroughs is places like Manchester, where we're looking at places like Oldham, which are kind of the outskirts of Manchester. But I view that similar to the way that London is, which is people don't want to be commuting in anymore. They certainly didn't want to pre-COVID. They certainly don't want to now. So I think there's opportunity in those outer markets.
So you still believe there's opportunity in certain outer markets. So it's not a complete no.
No, absolutely. I think, we spoke about this before, but working from home has been great in the short term, but in the long term,
I still don't agree. It's great at all. I'm not a good advert for the work from home community. I think it's honestly terrible. Even if internet is good, there's a difference between working from home and working in a community. I listened to something. What one guy I particularly like, he's not young, he's not that old, but 25 plus years property investing experience, property landlord, and he was saying people were watching DVDs, great sound on TVs and so forth, but you could not beat the social interaction of being in a cinema. Now, I'm not saying a co-working space is a cinema by any stretch, but there's something special. And maybe as a co-working owner, it's not straightforward. You've got to create that synergy as well. It's not just literally putting 10 chairs, 10 tables or whatever. There's more to it.
Yeah, it's the community that makes it. It's the people, but the aspect of it becomes quite aspirational. Which is, if you're a 6-person business or you're a 10-person business that's still in that startup phase, it is lonely. It is, you don't know what's happening around you. You're in that growth stage where you work, and what you want is a space that doesn't feel like you're stuck at home, but it also doesn't feel like you're stuck in the office. It's that blended mix. And that's what we've tried to create, a very design-led functional space that's built around community and culture, as opposed to just, here's 4 walls, go and work, go and work, go and work. Because that, nobody likes that. And that's the reason working from home doesn't work, because you're stuck in, the study, or you're stuck at the kitchen table. And actually you need to be around people, and you need infrastructure in place.
Look, we'll come back to community in just a moment. So I use a co-working space pre-COVID quite regularly. I was going to say something you said, which was interesting there. When you see other people have got permanent offices rather than hot desking, maybe it's just me, but it's an aspiration to move from the hot desking is going up one level into a fixed room. And it's easy to see because literally you can just look through the windows. So sometimes there's what you can't have, which becomes almost aspirational. So I was going to say one other thing to note. I notice hotels are trying to move into the market as well, and I don't want to say they're doing it wrongly or rightly. Maybe some are and some not, but it's just interesting. I noticed a trend in London in the last 6 to 12 months of hotels getting in on the space of co-working as well.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed it about 2 years ago at Shoreditch House.
Wow.
So Shoreditch House in London has a workspace area, which I thought was really well designed, really well done, and it worked quite well. I think those kind of co-work drop-in spaces will become very popular in hotel lobbies and things like that. But I think regardless of that, people will still need some form of fixed space. And that's not necessarily having 40 people in one space. That's maybe having a 50-person workforce, but having a 10-person office in one fixed location to give them an address. And if people need to be in for meetings, they can be in, and then they work from either flex space from home, whatever works for that. I think what we're going to see is businesses that typically took on, 20,000 square foot are going to suddenly start taking on 5, 6, 7, maybe 10,000 square foot at the most. They're not going to take on the large leases that they used to, and they're not going to take on 10-year leases anymore. They're going to want flex space that's flexible and allows them to take on, 24-month terms, 36-month terms. They're not going to want to commit to anything longer.
So a couple of things. One you mentioned is community, and obviously I've used WeWork, but not as a member. I've been told by members one of the benefits of WeWork is you get an app which gets you access to membership, and of course there's I'm part of work.live, which does things for its members as well. What do you think is the thing which creates the community, as you say? Is it themed afternoons, themed mornings? It's a bit more complex than just putting it in a pizza afternoon. I even remember the day of the week it is. It's on a Thursday at 5.
Well, I mean, all those things are great and they complement. You need those Thursday afternoon pizza nights. You need the Friday night drinks in the office so people interact and communicate and things. You need the networking events. You need all that, and there's this blended mix. I think the most key thing is thinking about how the design of the building is, right? Where are people going to walk to? What are they going to walk past? How are they going to see each other? Are these just stud walls and nobody knows who's in what office, or is it clear who's in what office so you can see who they are? You can go on. We're very same as WeWork. We have an app. You can go on. You can see what members are in the space, who's currently active in, so who's scanned in, not just the businesses. And it's built around getting people to interact, because why would you go and seek external advice from a lawyer when there's a law firm opposite you in the hallway or just down the hallway, and you can have a quick chat with?
Did you say you have an app which members can use?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Is that quite new or for yourself in the last 6 months, or?
Oh yeah. It's still in beta mode, so it's still in test mode. As soon as Reading launches in August, it'll be rolled out to all those members.
Okay, that's interesting, because that obviously the co-working space I have from my understanding, doesn't have that facility yet. Maybe that's something they'd be looking at. And of course,
think they are working on it. I know Work.life, and I think they are working on it. Yeah.
yeah, so that reinforces the community. Look,
Well, it's that, and it makes it simple as well. I mean, on the app, you can go on and check your invoices. You can go on and reach out to a certain member of the community. There's all these different extra functions, and I think the idea is to just give everybody everything that they could need rather than have them ask for it.
so just to summarize about your retail space and size, from my understanding, WeWork goes above 10,000 square foot. Is that right? And you go below. Sorry.
Yeah, there'll be 40,000 square foot at least.
Okay, so 40, and your target market is, I think, 7,500 to 10. Is that right?
No, our market is 10 to 25.
Okay, well, I got that.
Yeah,
I got this. So it's about half the size of a WeWork.
Yeah.
Is that partly because what you're focusing on retail is generally 10 to 25, and is that the reason why?
Yeah, I mean, typical retail units will be anywhere from 3 to 4, 5, 6, and so on. And what we're looking at is multiple ones in a row that we can put through, and that kind of dictates the floor plate. I mean, Stevenage is, I think, 3 retail units together, so that equals a 16,000 square foot site. That's generally why we've gone down that model. It also works economically for us. Anything less than kind of 10,000 square foot doesn't really work economically because we have staff there all the time. That's the overhead, things like this. So yeah, that's kind of where the sweet spot tends to be for us. I wouldn't want to go any more than 25,000 square foot because I see that as saturation risk. But what a traditional WeWork would do, I mean, take for instance in a London building, they'll have 10,000 square foot of flex space, and that's kind of the small 4-person offices and co-working and so on. And then they'll have multiple floors of just let out offices or half floors let out and so on. We've not gone to that route. We've not gone that high. The kind of largest suite we have is a 60-person office.
A 60-person office?
Yeah.
Okay, that for me that's huge. That I didn't know that. So
yeah,
and the smallest you go for in terms of office?
Smallest is 2-person.
So quite a significant difference between 2 and 60.
Look, they're the outliers. The most common office sizes are 6, 10, and 14. They're the most common often sizes. Like the majority of offices are that size.
Okay, look, so we briefly looked at retail. Are you the only operator in the UK that you know of who's looked at retail sites?
No, they'll all be doing it. I suspect they'll all be doing it. I know of a few that are actively doing it. They just haven't managed to secure anything. And the reason they haven't is because we're focused very regionally and they're focused in London. And the London retail market is very different to the regional retail market, as well as pricing and things like this. I mean, retail is typically a lot higher square foot. So, what we're realizing is landlords and funds are happy to go, okay, well, we'll do change of use and accept a lower rent because that gives us certainty. Whereas in London, you don't necessarily need that. There's not as much vacancy and there's much higher rents. I mean, I know some operators that are at like 105 a square foot just in a rent before they've even made their markup. So astronomical rents compared to regional locations.
Look, the two things I want to just cover. I want to cover COVID-19, what it means in terms of getting back into normality or temporary norm, as people like to call it. Yeah. So that's one thing I want to cover. And also just looking at the future of co-working, even in a short scale. Lots of companies saying to their staff, you can work from home, and home sometimes can mean a co-working space. And some companies, from my understanding, giving their staff credit, i.e., funding to work at a co-working space as well. Have you seen that in the UK, or is that still the American concept?
No, we're definitely seeing that in the UK. The last 2 to 3 weeks, we've seen a massive uptake in the Reading space. We did no marketing pre-COVID because of the timescales. Post-COVID, we've done no marketing as to yet, really, other than a few little bits. And we've had massive uptake. We've had an inquiry from, I won't name who, but we've had an inquiry from a large London-based bank that wants a 30-person office at Reading. And the reason
which makes sense because of Crossrail.
Yeah, and also because they've got staff commuting in and they only want to bring them into the city a couple of days a week, if that. They're looking and going, look, we've got 1,000 people commuting in on the tube journey. That's a 40-minute journey or whatever, bringing them all into one location. And actually, we can get away with having them just come in a few days and work from home or some form of flexible co-working space to rest.
I was just curious, how do banks know about your site? Is it through agents primarily?
Yeah, A, through agents, because we're pretty big on the agent run. But B, we got some pretty good coverage. I mean, we were featured in Property Week, but we also got some good coverage in the local media down in Reading as well.
Okay. So, and we're just going on the COVID-19 issue, because I was talking to Gavin Gallagher, to be fair, from
Yes.
East Point, and he gives it a bit of a minefield, to say the least. It's not as easy and straightforward as I would have thought it would be, particularly at his site, which is not one unit but 37 buildings on a
Yeah.
40 acres, so it's a completely different ball game. But what's key for you in COVID-19?
Yeah, absolutely. So COVID is quite an interesting one, because I think what we all saw, in the first few weeks was this kind of mass panic and everybody going, well, it's changing like this, changing like this. But when the dust kind of settled, everyone realised that, well, actually, it's probably not going to change as much as we think because of this, and this. Social distancing is definitely in place. We're putting that in place. Utilization of office space is going to drop. In terms of the utilization isn't going to be as intense. We sit around 85 to 100 square foot per person. I know some that are much lower in the 45 region, for instance, and those ones are going to have to rethink it. You're going to have to spread people out a little bit more. You're going to have businesses go, well, this is a 20-person suite, but I actually only want it for 15 people. Your HVAC is going to be a key one. And I actually had a call with Gavin, actually. It was a really interesting call, and we spoke about a few things that we were both.
Did you say the H factor, or you mean hygiene? I take it.
Yeah, the HVAC in terms of hygiene. So we both spoke about this and said that will be key. We do heating, cooling, but we also do fresh air. So you have to constantly be circulating the air, and a lot of the older office stock isn't doing that. So you need to go down that route in terms of the HVAC and things as a result of COVID. I think we're going to see this drive, as I mentioned, towards flex space, but also towards businesses downgrading and taking less space. So I think that will be the outcome for us. We're at the much lower end, so I'm not as concerned as if I had 37 buildings that I was then trying to fill. But I've seen the quality of his product, and I think he'll have no issue. The ones that scare me are the landlords that sit on old tired stock that have in recent years managed to let it at an okay rate and are now going to struggle without putting significant capex into the building.
Look, we're briefly, what do you think the key question to ask on Monday? So Gavin's going to be joining us, yourself. I don't know if you know John Williams, he's from the Instant Group. He's spoken at MIPHAM and places I've never heard of, to be fair,
Yes,
which
I know him, yeah.
So really delighted to have John. He spoke at my event 5 years ago, probably 5 years ago, and delighted to have him back as well. So I've got Karen Bennett from Lendwell, because I did want to have someone who's a funder, and Alex Hearn, who comes in the surveying background. What do you think the key question is? Is it the growth in co-working, or is there the opportunities, or what do you think the key question is?
Yeah, I think it's the opportunities, and I certainly think in the last few weeks we've all seen the market open back up and start to become very active. We often speak about things from our own perspective because that's all we see. We don't get exposure to other things. So I'll be very interested in what the guys are seeing in the market, what their feedback is, what their thoughts are. Because we're booming in Reading at the minute. We've got a lot of inquiries, but there might be another location that's actually being hit. So what does that look like? What does the market look like moving forward? And what's everybody's thoughts? Because the reality is, if all these businesses take less space, there's still the same amount of people that need to go somewhere. So where are they going to go? You're not going to have 2/3 of the workspace working from home. So where are they going to go to? Are they going to go to these hotels that are adapting? But if they do, then hotel stock's reduced. We've seen it with commercial to resi. We've seen office stock get used up to be turned into apartments. So then we're having to create new office stock because it's been taken out of the market. So it'll be very interesting to see where the market shift will go to and what those guys' thoughts are. So I'm hoping that will be one of the questions, as well as the kind of rise of co-working and the rise of different use classes within these buildings.
Look, so just to really end here, how can people connect with you, Will? What's your preferred method of communication? I know you've got Business Over Beers, your podcast, your website, or do you want to LinkedIn? What's your preferred? And what opportunities are you open to? Is it more retail opportunities, redundant retail?
Yeah, I mean, the best places to connect with me are LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. Most of my handles are at Mr. William Stokes, apart from LinkedIn, which is just William Stokes, I think. If you want to check us out, it's CoSpace. It's www.co-space.co.uk. I think, we're definitely open to chatting to landlords or owners of sites that want to get into the flex space, or whether they're interested in it. We can joint venture and operate the site and do it that way. We can just go for a straight lease if the site works. So I think that's the opportunity there. And what we can do with landlords is we can help bring our covenant to increase the value of the building, so it becomes a covenant and valuation play. So, I might go to you, well, actually, the building's here, you need to put in capex, but if you do that, the revaluation can be here, and then we can start to see those values shift. And someone like Darryl from Landwell and so on, they can kind of back up that valuation and so on. So very interested in having those conversations.
Yeah, I don't want to delay you anymore, but that's interesting when you mentioned the word evaluation, because from my understanding, speaking to Darryl, speaking to Alex particularly, it's valuations, which is tricky to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, valuing co-working is difficult. Valuing flex space less so, because you've got fixed revenues in serviced office. That's why about 85% of our floor plate is serviced office space. That's where you drive your valuation from. When your co-working is month to month, you find it hard to kind of justify the income and justify the valuation value.
I was listening online to a discussion from, I can't remember his name, but quite a senior position in one of the largest property companies, and he mentioned about valuations. Didn't mention about co-working as such, but he mentioned about build to rent. He said years ago, people, valuers struggled to come up with what the true value was. So, he said since then they've done quite well. They've understood the market, and it's really about companies understanding the market as such. Any final thoughts before we conclude on Friday afternoon?
No, I'm just really excited, and I hope people will get some value from Monday's panel. I'm looking forward to speaking on that, and yeah, I'm looking forward to getting other people's thoughts. I'm always open to new ideas, and there's often things that I've missed or so on. So, if you think my opinion is wrong, please challenge me and let's have a discussion.
I was going to say, I think it's the first time ever I've had a panel just dedicated to the office sector.
Oh, awesome. Cool.
So,
well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks, Will, for being part of it, and thanks to our audience as well.